Greetings to everyone on my channel. In the previous video, it was about sealing the joints between sheets of drywall. For those who may be interested, you will find a link to the video in the description of this video, and if you have not yet subscribed, do not forget to subscribe to my channel. In this video, the stage that follows after sealing the joints of drywall will be considered, which includes gluing the fiberglass and the subsequent putty of the ceiling. The finishing of a two-level ceiling has to be done in stages. Until the ceiling lighting niche boxes are installed, I am finishing the ceiling of the first level, and after installing all the remaining drywall, the time will come for finishing the second level. Such measures are due to the fact that the second level of the ceiling, which includes the LED backlight boxes, will not allow the normal high-quality finishing of the places covered by these same boxes. Therefore, I had to putty and paint this level before the complete installation of drywall was completed. After sealing the joints of drywall with a concrete ceiling and gluing paper tape on them, I cover the concrete ceiling and vertical parts of the gypsum board with putty, using now putty, polymer finish. In 2 layers, with intermediate drying, I cover the concrete ceiling of the first level with putty. I would like to say for beginners in this business, there is no need to try to cover the ceiling with the first layer of putty so that it immediately becomes perfectly even. The putty will be much smoother and easier to lay down in the second layer. The task when applying the first layer putty is to cover the base, close all micropores and cracks. I will not talk about large irregularities, since a plaster mixture is already required here. After applying the first layer of putty, let it dry, after which, if you have not made strong bumps and left no marks that can be knocked down with a wide spatula, putty is made with a second layer. Many people ask whether it is necessary to prime the ceiling after the first layer of putty. On this question, I will say this: if the first layer was initially applied well and was not cleaned with sandpaper, then it is not necessary. But if the putty was heavily sanded, then these places can be covered with a primer and thereby remove dust from the surface and achieve better adhesion. After applying the putty in a second layer, let it dry. Further, with the help of a lamp, I detect defects and remove them with a bar with sandpaper, after which I putty the ceiling with a third layer, a fine dispersion putty. For example, I use rot band paste. This putty is fine-grained, it is applied only in a thin layer, and with proper skills it can be applied ideally without the need for subsequent sanding, and after it dries, an ideally smooth surface for painting is obtained. For those who are not sure that they can cover the ceiling with a third layer, so that no grinding of the ceiling is required, it makes sense to grind for painting immediately the second layer and not experiment with rot band paste. After the final drying of rot band paste, I let the primer dry, and then the ceiling is painted. For ceiling painting, see a separate video. I will also post a link to it in the description. In this situation, it was decided to reinforce the plasterboard ceiling of the second level, consisting of many parts and having a large number of joints, with a glass mesh. To reduce the time and exclude one operation, the glass mesh was installed directly on the putty layer. I would like to note that I would not recommend this method to beginners. The fact is that you need to work very quickly by gluing the glass mesh onto the putty, since the glass mesh will no longer hold onto the drying putty. Glue the glass mesh onto the putty, preferably in small pieces, gradually moving further and further along the ceiling. Therefore, if there is a need to apply glass mesh to the ceiling, really assess your strength. Perhaps it will be much easier, having lost one day, to glue the glass mesh on a special glue, and then, calmly, apply a layer of putty on the already glued glass mesh. When working with a glass mesh, I use a respirator and gloves, since fine glass dust is poured from this mesh, from which, even with a slight touch to it without gloves, the skin is very irritated, which will subsequently itch hands. The joints of two pieces of glass mesh, I connect the joint to the joint. To do this, by connecting the pieces of glass mesh with an overlap, using a knife, I cut through both parts, trying not to damage the drywall. Then I remove the scraps and smooth the surface with a spatula. Having glued the glass mesh over the entire surface of the drywall, I give time for the putty to dry. After that, if necessary, I apply another layer of polymer putty. After the second layer has dried, sand the ceiling with sandpaper using directional lighting. Directional light, I use to identify defects. When the lamp is located near the ceiling, a shadow appears from irregularities. Thus, the entire ceiling is examined, and defects, if any, are polished. If you ignore the use of light when sanding the ceiling, you may subsequently encounter an unpleasant surprise when a previously imperceptible defect becomes visible, for example, after installing a lamp located directly under the ceiling itself, or when the lighting is off and daylight falls into the window. Next, I cover the entire ceiling with a third layer of wrought band paste, after which I check the ceiling with light, and grind the defects found. After all the work has been done, the ceiling is covered with a primer and becomes ready for painting, which you can find out about in my next video. On this I wish you all good luck. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and see you soon.